Day on TV1. Yeah, we've got some changes. This program is supposed to be starting at 6 right away from today. So we apologize for the inconveniences, but we decided to pick this 1 hour so that we may have a little bit of a clear description and talking about the certain events that are going on in the world. So my name is Dr. Samuel Charles Cake, and I want to wish you a very good morning and a very nice week in this last month of June. Right away, let's go to our first story, and this is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Strait of Hormuz has been reclosed. Allegations are coming out that the Strait of Hormuz has been reclosed. That is as per the reports that are coming out from Iran. It should be noted that the Strait of Hormuz was first closed by Iran in March. That was following the operation that was declared by America, the operation that they referred to Operation Epic Fury. On the 28th of July, the 28th of February, America decided to wage a war, or what they called a preemptive attempt, to ensure that they bring Iran under siege. That was per the allegations and the failure of the talks that were going on in Oman. So since then, the Strait of Hormuz has been very much closed. It was closed by Iran on the side where it has control, and then it was also closed on the side of Oman where America has control. America came up with what we call the naval blockade. Now, there has been so many attempts between America and Iran to ensure that this this Strait of Hormuz gets reopened. And this is following the discussion that they were supposed to have last week on Thursday. Now, following the discussion that they had last week on Thursday, America, Pakistan, India, and so many countries that were involved in there, they came up with what you call the 14 points. Now, the 14 points were supposed to be a basis of discussion that were supposed to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz get closed. And actually, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz was clause number 5. So by the time we went into weekend last week, by the time we went into the previous weekend, the Strait of Hormuz had been closed. Now, as we speak, in the last 2 days, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed again by Iran. Why? Out of the 14 points that were tabled by Iran, by a combination of Iran and Pakistan, and of course they were endorsed by Donald Trump, the President of America, they came out and said that as part of the ceasefire, actually, out of the 14 points that were supposed to be discussed, the 14 points were supposed to be a framework of further talks and discussions. And the point was, out of all the 14 points, point number 3 said that as far as the discussion was supposed to be going on, the Strait of Hormuz was supposed to be opened, and the ceasefire was not only supposed to work on the side of Iran, it was also supposed to work on the side of Lebanon. Now, amid this discussion, Israel was left out. Because at the end of the day, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, did not have any say somehow, somewhere. And this is something that has made it very, very hard. Actually, following the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and following the declaration of the 14 points from that very agreement, Israel didn't like it. Israel didn't like it. It was a little bit very shaky and a little bit very, very uncooperative. And that's why so many people say that if this endorsement, if this framework that had been agreed upon by all those powers is not accepted by Israel, definitely you cannot see a ceasefire going forward. One of the conditionalities that we are put in the ceasefire as well was about the declaration of war, the cessation of war in Lebanon. Now, an issue was tabled by Iran that in order for us to go on with this discussion, we are supposed to have what we call a ceasefire also at the side of Lebanon. Why would Iran get involved into Lebanon? Lebanon is a neighbor of Israel from the northern side, from northern eastern side. Now, since 1982, during the formation of Hezbollah, Israel has always been attacking Lebanon. But in the last 2 weeks, in the last month actually, we've seen a series of deadly attacks that have been launched by Israel against Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is one of the closest allies onto the side of Iran. Why? One of the biggest political parties that is very instrumental in Lebanon, it is called Hezbollah. The Hezbollah was established in 1982. But Hezbollah has been so much operational on the side, I mean, with getting a lot of support from Iran. So Hezbollah is a political party in Lebanon with a lot of influence, most especially in the southern eastern part rather, of Lebanon. They also have a lot of members of parliament, including some of the people that are very prominent in Beirut. So when this ceasefire declaration or when the memorandum of understanding was talked about again, Iran said that as we are ceasing fire on the front where America is waging a war against Iran, they also brought in Lebanon, that Lebanon should be one of the countries or should be one of the fronts where a ceasefire has to be brought about. And guess what? America respected that. Actually, 2 weeks ago, when they were still pushing what we call the declaration, the memorandum of understanding. Now, this is just a memorandum of understanding. It is a framework that is supposed to be guiding the discussions that they are going to have for the next 60 days. It's not an agreement. It's not an armistice. It's not a ceasefire. It's just a framework, a document, an explanation of what they intend to do. The declaration is supposed to be moving on forward, and the discussions are supposed to be moving on forward. Actually, as we speak, these discussions are going on in Switzerland. And the American side that is being represented in this discussion is led by the American Vice President, J.D. Vance. They also have 2 other representatives, including Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is an in-law to Trump. Why? Because it's the person that married Trump's daughter. That young woman is called Ivanka Trump. He is very, very instrumental. He has been very instrumental, most especially during this second term. And we also don't have to forget that one of the Middle East consultants that Donald Trump has been in position to establish is a gentleman called Steve Witkoff. Steve Witkoff has been very, very instrumental. Now, the discussions are going on. That is the side that is led on the side, that is the side or the peace agreement or the peace declaration side that is led by J.D. Vance. That is the American Vice President, including people like Jared Kushner, who has been very instrumental, most especially in this term of Donald Trump, and is Trump's in-law because he's the one that married Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump. And then I've also talked about Steve Witkoff. All these people have been very instrumental, not only in this conflict, but they were also very instrumental when it came to the Gaza peace deal that they shared or they had early in January this year. Steve Witkoff was also very instrumental when it came to the discussions where Vladimir Putin met President Donald Trump last year when they met in Alaska. One of the biggest persons that was very, very instrumental, that was Steve Witkoff in this kind of declaration. Of course, the side of Iran is led by Abbas Araghchi. This is the foreign minister. And then they're also led by the parliamentary speaker, Gabba, and so many other people. Don't have to forget that there are also representatives that are coming from the side, of Pakistan as well. Because within this entire conflict, Pakistan has been one of the biggest mediators or mediator powers that has been very much involved as far as this conflict is concerned. It should be noted that the declaration comes after the failure of Israel to to end their secessions or to end their aggressions against Lebanon. You don't have to forget that what we are talking about here is that this was the condition that was put up by Iran. Out of the 14 points that were declared by Donald Trump, which were supposed to be the basis of discussion when it came to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and ensuring that there is permanent stability amongst the two powers. The fact is, Operation Epic Fury, or the war that was declared by Donald Trump against the Republic of Iran, has almost been a very, very serious failure on the side of the Americans. Now, the declaration of war by Israel against Lebanon has been one of the biggest factors that is making it very, very hard on the side of the Israelis and on the side of Americans to ensure that they have permanent peace and stability amongst themselves and the countries that they are getting involved in. What you have to, I would like to take you through what we call the 14 points that were declared as basis of the Memorandum of Understanding last week on Thursday. The first part was the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not going through them by order, but I'm just talking about what they had to agree upon. They were supposed to declare what you call the Strait of Hormuz was supposed to be declared open. Now, we've always been talking about the Strait of Hormuz here, and we've always been emphasizing that this is one of the deadliest world choke point. It's a choke point. We call it a choke point. Why? Because it's one of the bases or one of the areas that controls what we call world trade. You know, when you talk about world trade, in most cases, we are talking about shipping, how commodities, how merchandise, most especially transportation, like oil, is being, transported to different areas. So one of the biggest areas that is very, very instrumental in ensuring that this business is carried forward is what we call the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a 36-kilometer region that is located between Oman and Iran. Now, almost all the Asian countries, all the countries that we talk about in the Persian Gulf that are responsible in the transportation of oil or in the exportation of oil, they do use what we call the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that their oil comes on the world market. I'm talking about countries like Oman. I'm talking about countries like Bahrain, Kuwait. You can talk about Iran. You can talk about Iraq. You can talk about the United Arab Emirates. You can talk about Qatar. You can talk about Iraq. You can talk about all those countries that are located in what you call the Persian Gulf. Now, they don't have any other alternative. The alternatives are present. The alternatives are available, but this is the cheapest, or this is the closest where all oils can be brought on world market or can be supplied on world market through what you call the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran closed it on the other side by dumping what we call, by putting up a very, very brutal force that is led by, it is part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, but it's also on the other side, it is part of what we call the Passage. The Passage is also one of the very, very strong military agencies or military wings that has been so much responsible in the protection of the revolution that Iran went into. That was in 1979. So they closed it, and they also put in what you call water mines. Just like you can talk about land mines, bombs that are put in land to ensure that probably they can protect a given area. But Iran was also in a position to put up what you call water mines. And these water mines have been very, very, very instrumental, and they made it very easy very hard, for different European countries to ensure that they fetch out or they transport their oil supplies on the world market. This has been very, very, very hard on the side of Iran. So when Iran came and closed it on the other side, also America came and closed it on this side. That is what we call at the Gulf of Oman. Now, what you call a strait is a narrow water body that connects two bigger water bodies. Because on the other side, you have what you call the Persian Gulf, and then on the other side, you have what you call the Gulf of Oman. Now, in between there, that part that connects the two, that connects the Persian Gulf and that connects the Gulf of Oman, that territory or that narrow waterway, that is what you call the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I was still taking you through some of the discussions that were part of the 14 points that were brought up by United States of America, including the presidency of Donald John Trump, of course, backed up by also European powers. You don't forget that last week still, after the declaration of the 14 points, Donald Trump went and attended what we call the G7 conference, which was in Versailles, France. Where almost all the top economies or the top 7 economies of the world were in discussions. Of course, including Britain, that was represented by Keir Starmer, including France, which was the host, of course, led by Emmanuel Macron. You don't forget there was Germany, led by Mars. There was Canada, led by Mark Carney. Also, Africans were invited. One of the people that were invited, including the president of Kenya, William Samoei Ruto, represented this country, and also Mohamed Fattah al-Sisi, and this is the current president of Egypt. Those are the two people that represented Africa. They weren't so much like a representation, but they were just invited in to ensure that they also get involved and be part of this discussion. So while they were at this discussion of G7, Trump almost made everything seem better. And actually, so many people are praising him for pulling off this deal. But all these people were a little bit not so much acceptable. Why? Because they knew that the absence of Benjamin Netanyahu, or without having Israel coming in with a clear side, without having Israel coming in with a clear declaration of, endorsement of this conflict, it was going to be very, very hard. Now, the issue that is making it very hard for Donald Trump to ensure that he pushes what's called the MOU, irrespectiveness of the discussions that are going on right now in Switzerland, it is the engagement of, it is how Israel have decided to engage in Lebanon. Like we said, when America chose to declare war over Iran, Israel chose to declare war over Lebanon. Why Lebanon? I think that should also be one of the questions. Why is Israel attacking Lebanon? Israel is not only attacking Lebanon. Actually, all those countries around are being attacked by Israel. But specifically, when you're moving away from Israel, you're connecting to what you call Syria. The entire part of Syria, which is referred to as the Golan Heights, all these areas have been taken away by Israel. Actually, I think they've got them occupied for the last 40 years because Israel started extending their control to what you call Golan Heights, which are supposed to be areas or territories or part of Syria. Israel took them over. They're in the control of what's called the Golan Heights. Now, when you move past the Golan Heights, then you're coming into what you call Lebanon. Now, as we speak, Israel has almost conquered 51 areas or 51 villages in Lebanon. That is the southeastern part of Lebanon. To the extent that they put up what you call a blue line. A blue line, this is an indicator that was allegedly put up by Israel to show exactly where the leadership of Iran, where the leadership of Lebanon is supposed to be. Just imagine someone coming into your country, they take it over, and then they demarcate exactly where you're supposed to end. They put up what you call the blue line, which is almost moving around what you call the Latik River. There is a very wonderful river there in Lebanon. And they've said that any area downwards or down on the side of the Latin River, no one is supposed to come in. Israel is choosing Lebanon for harboring or for being a very serious habitat of the Hezbollah. Now, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, it's not only a terrorist organization, just like America, just like Lebanon just like Israel claims it is. It's not a terrorist organization. It is a political party that also has members of parliament. It's a political party. But Israel claims that the operations or any activities that are done by the Hezbollah in Lebanon, they are a serious threat on the side of Israeli security. So that's why they've chosen to attack. And as we speak, almost 4,500 people have died during this very conflict. They've hit churches, they've hit schools, they've hit hospitals, they've almost killed a lot of paramedicals. Because when we were talking about a war and we talk about the rules of engagement, you're not supposed to kill paramedical people, or in other words, you're not supposed to kill doctors that are coming in to give support or to give treatment to the people that are being affected by war. Doctors are not supposed to be attacked, and also people of the press, the people of the media, are not supposed to be attacked as well. But as we speak, it is also some other genocide that so many people are connecting or are relating to what's happening in Gaza as well. So as we speak, yes, the discussions are going on in Switzerland, and the idea is to ensure that the memorandum of understanding is almost put to a very clear understanding amongst the bigger powers or amongst themselves. But the conditionality or the condition of Lebanon and Israel, it's becoming a very, very, very serious deal. Actually, some people are saying that probably Israel didn't want to attack Iran. They wanted to attack Lebanon. That was a little bit of some other analysis. That their target has never been Iran. Their target has always been Lebanon. Why? You cannot attack Lebanon and Iran at the same time. So probably they had to make Iran a little bit busy, because Iran, as we speak, is busy protecting its own territories. So when Iran is busy, Iran is the only country that could have intervened on the side of Lebanon. So what do? You make Iran busy by giving them what you call a domestic confrontation. In other words, they are defending themselves. They are fighting a war of defense. That makes it very hard on the other side to come and extend their support or a hand of help on the side of Lebanon. So that's why it has been very, very easy for the people for the Israelites to ensure that they put up a very, very easy, attack or mission on the side of Lebanon. But as we speak, almost 4,000 people have been recorded dead. That is specifically in Lebanon. Actually, number of people that are dead in Lebanon are even more than the number of people that are dead in Iran since the America-Israeli conflict started. So Lebanon has lost a lot of people. To the extent, just like I've said, they've almost conquered 51 villages in Lebanon. So Iran is saying, if Israel doesn't get out of Lebanon, we are closing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this makes it very, very hard for the world to continue having serious businesses. As we speak, there are oil prices everywhere. Oil prices are still spiking. And we were thinking that probably after the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which we were in a position to experience the previous weekend, probably people thought that the prices would go a little bit very down. Why? Because the supply of oil on the world market was was expected to get a little bit very, very high. Now that the Strait of Hormuz has been reclosed again, it makes it very, very hard for business to go on very well. So the conditions of the 14 points that were discussed by America and Iran to ensure that they come up with what called the permanent ceasefire are almost getting so much violated. Why? Because of Israel's invasion towards Lebanon. Some of other conditions that were part of this arrangement were America was supposed to respect what you call Iran's sovereignty. In other words, Iran is supposed to do whatever it wants within its own country. You don't have to forget that one of the missions or one of the objectives of the war, those were the intentions. The intent of America when they were attacking Iran, they said that they wanted to have what called the regime change. That's why the Ayatollah was eliminated at almost 80 years of age. That was the discussion. They were supposed to have what you call a regime change, and they were supposed to have what we call, they were supposed to put up what you call a stop on the productions of weapons of massive destruction, specifically nuclear bomb. Now as we speak, the issue of sovereignty, it means that America doesn't have to decide on what's going to be done on the side of Iran, most especially when it comes to their leadership. There is a leadership in Iran already led by Ayatollah Mojtaba. This is a son of the previous Ayatollah who died at 80. The son is 56 years. Now the son that is almost leading in Iran, he lost a wife, he lost a father, and a son and a second wife. This was due to the series of invasions and attacks that were made by America through what they called Operation Epic Fury. Now that's the gentleman that is now in the leadership of Iran, and no one has ever seen him since. Actually, he was last seen in public in 2005. In other words, America is trying to pursue a discussion with a leader that they've never seen. Mojtaba was last seen in public in 2005. You can really imagine which kind of leader is that. So the point that we're trying to talk about is that the declaration of war, or the area that is trying to push forward, the discussions that are aiming at pushing what you call the Memorandum of Understanding. Like we've said, the discussions are going on in Switzerland as we speak. The side of Iran is led by Abbas Araghchi, who has been very, very popular of recent. And then on the side of America, the American Vice President, that is J.D. Vance, is there representing America. And then Jared Kushner representing America as well. And Steve Witkoff, who has been very, very instrumental during this very term, most especially in shaping what we call Trump's foreign policy in the Middle East. So that is it that we have to say about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this also takes us to the other straits. We wanted to make discussion a little bit very fundamental, so that we can understand. Just like we've talked about the Strait of Hormuz that connects the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, there are so many other straits that are very instrumental in ensuring that trade or shipment or merchandise or waterways or taking over commodities, getting them supplied to different countries is a little bit respected. In Africa, we have 3 straits. One of the biggest straits that we have in Africa is what we call the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. The Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. This is what connects what we call the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. The Gulf of Aden is a waterway that connects to what we call the Indian Ocean. And then, okay, I've talked about the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, and I'm saying this is what connects connects the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea. Now that is between Djibouti On this side, it is that upper part. If you're moving across Somalia, then you move up there. That's where that strait is. It connects Djibouti. It is between Djibouti and Yemen. On the African side, it is on the side of Djibouti. On the other side, it is on the side of Yemen. And you don't have to forget, in Yemen, Iran is one of the most influential countries as well in Yemen. Because all the Houthi fighters that were controlled and handled by Qasem Soleiman. Qasem Soleiman was one of the most fundamentals that was very, very serious in the establishment of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was eliminated in 2023 by America, and he was eliminated in Baghdad. Actually, he was killed by a drone strike in Baghdad. That was 2023. So that is what we call the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. It is what connects what we call the Red Sea and the Gulf of Eden. On the other side, it's connected on the side of Djibouti. And then when you cross over and you move to Asia, it is connected on the side of Yemen. Then you also have what we call the Strait of Gibraltar. Now the Strait of Gibraltar is what connects the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Now that is between Morocco on the side of Africa and Spain on the side of Europe. So that waterway, that narrow waterway that connects the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic waters or the Atlantic Ocean, that is what we call the Strait of Gibraltar. We did a story about it here when we were talking about our segment on in Africa, and we said the Strait of Gibraltar was named by a gentleman in 711. 711, one of the greatest African generals, merchandise or traders, was called Ibn Tariq. Ibn Tariq Gabriel. So that's why from the name Gabriel, we get the word Gibraltar. And from the name Tariq, we get a term called the tariffs. Tariffs, we are referring to exchanges or to taxes that are so much imposed on people, on the items, most especially that are supplied on water. It's because of Ibn Tariq Gabriel that we get the word tariffs. That is almost the taxes that are levied on water, or on commodities rather, that are transported on water, and also Gibraltar, because the first taxes in history, the first forms of taxes that were collected in history, they were collected by transporting commodities from Africa, that is Morocco, that is Casablanca, that is Tangier, that's Agadir. Those who understand where Morocco is, when they were crossing over to what we call Salamanca, that is Spain. Of course, that was the 711. So that's what we call the Strait of Gibraltar, which connects what we call the Atlantic waters to the Mediterranean Sea. And then the other strait that we have on the African continent, you can call it the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope is down here in South Africa because it's what connects the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. So that narrow waterway that connects the two water bodies, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean, that's what we call the Strait or the Cape of Good Hope. It is one of the areas. But of course, elsewhere, we have some other straits, including the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca connects what we call Indonesia and Malaysia. It connects what we call Indonesia and Malaysia. In other words, it connects what we call the Atlantic waters to the East China Sea, actually to the southern part of the China Sea. It connects what we call the Atlantic waters and the South China Sea. That's what we call the Strait of Malacca. But you also have some other straits, including the Bering Strait. The Bering Strait is what connects the Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Sea. The Pacific Ocean and the Arctic Sea, that is if you move up in the northern equator. Now that is what connects America and Russia. We call it the Bering Strait. These are natural waterways that connect two water bodies to ensure that transportation is going on. But that is it for the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Things are not very, very fine, most especially to those that are so much using oil to ensure that business is going on in so many ways. Now that the Strait of Hormuz is closed again, we expect a lot of other changes. But we pray that the discussions get the best, most especially when they get Benjamin Netanyahu. When Netanyahu gets involved in these discussions, such that he chooses to declare war, to declare cessation of war on the side of Lebanon. Because Iran is saying, not until Israel gets out of Lebanon, we are not going to continue with the conflicts, with the peace talks that have been so much put forward. Yes, let's go for a short commercial break. you're still watching New Day on TV1, see the difference. All right. Let's continue. Let's continue with another story. Now, one of our segments that we have today is our Today in History. One of the segments that we have in this program is called Today in History. I will ask producer Jack to get up and do what you're supposed to be doing. Let us do our Today in History. And Today in History, we are talking about the fall of France. That is what we are doing in our segment Today in History. We are doing the fall of France. Now this is World War II. Today in History, the segment where we highlight one of the outstanding events or one of the outstanding, operations or events that occurred on that specific day. And today we are putting our highlight on what we call the fall of France. Now, the fall of France is what we are talking about in Today in History. What was the fall of France? When you talk about the fall of France, France fell in 1940. I'm emphasizing a point of, I'm talking about a segment that we have, it's called Today in History, and we are talking about the fall of France. What happened, and what do you mean by the fall of France? Now, World War II starts on the 1st of September, 1939. One of the countries that were fighting, it was a war that went on between the Allied powers and the Axis powers. The Allied powers were led by Britain, France, Russia, and then the Axis powers were led by Germany, Japan, Italy, and their allies. But specifically with the fall of France, what happened was very simple. France got occupied by the Nazi forces. This is one of the most dangerous parts, one of the dangerous occurrences or events that we had in history. That the fall of France was one of the biggest highlights in the experiences of what you call in World War II. Now what happened was, when Germany attacked Poland on the 31st of August 1939, one of the countries that were expected to put up resistances as far as this mission was concerned, that was France, right? But the countries that were attacked, Germany did not attack France initially. It first attacked Poland. When it attacked Poland, it attacked Greece, it attacked Turkey, and almost most of those areas. These countries never wanted to engage. They never wanted to engage Germany. After all, Germany was more superior. Germany was stronger. But as the war advanced and went forward, they also went and attacked several other countries. One of the countries that were attacked, that was France. France was attacked actually by World War II to the extent, by Germany in World War II, to the extent that almost 2/3 of the entire France were controlled by, Germany. Actually, France got divided into two. The northern-western part of France got taken up by Germany. Germany came and authoritatively took over France, almost all those areas. It came and occupied all those areas. Now, it became so hard for the French to put up serious resistance, to the extent some of the outstanding leaders of France had to run away. One of the biggest people that ran away was the gentleman called Charles de Gaulle. So some of the people that were very prominent right then in France, including a gentleman called Charles de Gaulle, there was a gentleman called Pétain, and then there was also a gentleman called Vince. All these guys had failed. In other words, Vince and Pétain, for them, they decided to come up with a little bit of a perpetual regime that was almost endorsed by the Nazi forces. So in other words, what we're trying to talk about is that the entire France got occupied or got taken over by Germany during the course of World War II. Now, France was liberated by the African people. That's why France has the biggest number of blacks in Europe. If you're looking for a country that has the biggest number of black people in Europe, it is France. The black population in France is very, very high. Why? Because when Africans went to give a hand, most of them did come back. Actually, it was because of that background that Charles de Gaulle, one of the most prominent leaders in France, decided to come to Africa. They decided to come to Africa in 1944, and they got involved in what they called the Brazzaville Conference. At Brazzaville, that is Congo Brazzaville, France came and convened or consulted all African countries that had been colonized by France, and they asked them to go and give them support. Actually, it was after the declaration of war, it was after the fall of France, that all the allied powers were like, let us put our forces into one command. That is what led to the establishment of what you call the SHAPE, the Supreme Allied Command, or the Supreme Allied Command, where they put all their forces under one leadership. It was put under leadership of one American general. The gentleman was called General David Dwight Eisenhower, or General David Dwight Eisenhower. So when these guys came together, all the allied powers, they put their forces together, led by America, because America got involved in the war almost in 1943, after 3 years. So when America got involved, they were like, no, we cannot put up resistance against the Axis powers. The Axis powers were Germany, Japan, and Italy. Those were the major Axis powers. The allied powers, the major ones were Britain, France, Russia. Eventually, America became part. So when America takes part, when America becomes part of this, they were like, okay, we cannot have independent aggressions or independent invasions. Let us put all our forces under one command. That's what they came up with, what you call the CENTCOM, or what we would call the Central Command. They call it the Supreme Allied Command. The Supreme Allied Command, where they put all their forces under the command of the American general. The gentleman was called General David Dwight Eisenhower. And what happened? They declared what you call Operation Overlord. Now, Operation Overlord was a combination of American, British, Russian forces, including African forces that were acquired from the 1944 Brazzaville Conference to ensure that they go and liberate France. So it's the Africans, the Americans, the Britons, and other countries that brought their forces together, and they chose to declare a war over Germany in a way of chasing them away from the domination that they had in France. And they called it Operation Overlord. Operation Overlord. Actually, that's where the D-Day comes from. When someone talks about the D-Day, talking about that specific day that you've been waiting for, that is the military code that they used to declare what you call the First War. Now, when they went and declared what you call Operation Overlord, this is when they sent away the Nazi forces that had dominated the Republic of France. They sent them away. Actually, when they sent them away, France got their independence again. That's why so many Africans decided to keep around in Paris and other areas. So that's what we want to talk about today. But Operation Overlord was declared as a mission that led to the declaration of war that was very much aimed at liberating the Republic of France under the Nazi domination in 1940. That's what we had today in history. But like I've said, this operation was declared and it was called Operation Overlord, which was aiming at chasing away all the Nazi forces that had taken over the northern western part of France. This operation was led by an American general, led by a gentleman called General David Eisenhower. General David Eisenhower. Actually, after this conflict, after World War II, that's why David Dwight Eisenhower became the president of America. Dwight Eisenhower became the president of America after World War II. Why? Because he was a military general that had experience. And it was a little bit easier for leaders, or meaning for countrymen back in the days after World War II, to ensure or to see their country manned or led by a soldier. That's why after this conflict, General David Eisenhower became the president of the United States of America, and then followed by J.F. Kennedy, who became a president in 1960, and then others like Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, and others up to where we are in the regime of Donald John Trump. So that is it for our today in history. We just wanted to highlight what happened, what we call the fall of France. This is when the Nazi forces came and dominated almost three quarters of the entire France. And it is something that went on for quite some time, actually up to 1945. For almost 5 years, from 1940 up to 1945, the entire France was under the control of the German forces. That is what we had in our today in history, the fall of France. And whenever someone mentions something like the D-Day, just know we are talking about what you refer to as the Operation Overlord, which was aimed at liberating France from the Nazi domination. And I've said that that mission was called the Operation Overlord, and it was led by an American general. But of course, there were also other British generals, including General Montgomery. I think those are some of the names. There was a gentleman called Colonel Bernard Montgomery was one of the first elite forces, or elite soldiers actually, that led this. But of course, not forgetting so many of our ancestors, the black people, including some of them actually that are responsible for bringing some of us on this planet. They so much liberated, because like I've said, when France got to know that it was going to be very hard for them to get their countries liberated, they had to come to Africa. So that's why Charles de Gaulle, one of the leaders of France, decided to invite all African countries in what came to be known as the Brazzaville Conference in 1940, where different African countries were promised independence, including Mali, Congo Brazzaville, Burkina Faso. You talk about Niger. You talk about all those West African countries that were under the control or the colonization of France. They were promised independence to the extent that they chose to go and liberate France. After liberation of France, that's why in the 1950s, 60s, most of them started getting what we call political independence right there. So that is it. Let's go for a short commercial break. You're still watching New Day on TV1. We said that this program is supposed to be starting at 6 a.m. up to 9. So just in case you're joining us right now, yes, we are running this program from 6 to 9 a.m. So let's go for a short commercial break. We're still coming back with more stories. You're still watching New Day on TV1. See the difference. Let's continue. We have a little bit of some technical problem. Yeah, someone is sending a text here. And is saying that we've not had about the 14. We've not had about. Oh yeah, this is a colleague. He's asking that we've not had about the 14 points. We've not had about the 14 points of the U.S.-Iran memorandum. The U.S.-Iran memorandum. He has not seen something about it. Yes, surprisingly, the kind of memorandum or the memorandum that you're talking about, it has not been so much popularized. But probably I will summarize all the 14 points. Let me summarize the 14 points for you such that you get to know what we are talking about here. Yes, out of the 14 points, now we're saying that this is not an agreement. This is not a conclusion. This is not a conclusion that's supposed to lead what to call to a ceasefire. No. It is just a framework that is supposed to be guiding the discussions. The discussions are supposed to be going on in the next 60 days. Actually, as we speak, discussions are going on in Switzerland already. Like I've said, America is represented by J.D. Vance. It's represented by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. And also Abbas Araghchi, the Prime Minister of Iran, and Bagha, the Speaker of Parliament in Iran. Those are some of the people that are leading the discussions on the side of Iran. So I will summarize all the 14 points. The first point out of the 14 points says, number 1, permanent cessation of hostilities and commitment to peace. In other words, they are saying that they should have what called permanent cessations. In other words, there should not be any invasion amongst the countries when the discussions are going on. Number 2, mutual respect for sovereignty and non-interference in each other's internal affairs. Mutual respect for sovereignty and non-interference in each other's national internal affairs. That is article number 2. Article number 3 says, commitment to negotiate a final agreement within 60 days. Commitment to negotiate a final agreement within the 60 days. Yes, in other words, like I've said, the discussion that's supposed to be going on for the next 60 days. Just because all the 14 points have been agreed upon, they are not the final conclusions. In other words, some of them might be lifted off or some of them might be changed. That is article number 3. Point number 4 says, U.S. begins lifting maritime restrictions, blockade, and reducing impediments to Iranian shipping. Article number 4 says, point number 4 rather says, US begins lifting maritime restrictions, blockade, and reducing impediments to Iran's shipping. Article number 5, point number 5 says, Iran allows passage of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz and works towards restoring normal traffic levels. Now, this is the one that has already been violated. It says, Iran allows safe passage for commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz and works towards restoring normal tariff levels. As we speak, the Strait of Hormuz has been reclosed again by Iran. But like we've said, Iran is also coming up with a lot of allegations. They are saying that not until Israel respects Lebanon, we are also not reopening the Strait of Hormuz. That is number 5. Number 6 says, US and regional partners support a reconstruction and economic development program for Iran, reportedly valued at least $300 billion US. It says, US and regional partners support a reconstruction and economic development program for Iran, reportedly valued at least $300 billion. Now, this is a very big one on the side of Iran. Now that America and Israel have destroyed a lot of commodity, a lot of infrastructure, dams, roads, schools, hospitals in Iran, Iran is calling for what we call a reconstruction fee. And they're asking for $300 billion. And that money is already being processed. Actually, as we speak, Iran has already received $10 billion US through Qatar. This money has already been received. Last week, by the end of last week on Friday, Iran had already received $3 billion from the US through Qatar. But of course, they didn't want to say it was US, but this money was received through Qatar. So in other words, to support what we call reconstruction, Iran is saying that we need $300 billion US. Would that money be granted? Oh, we are saying this is not a final, but is also part of the MOU guidelines. Number 7, gradual termination of sanctions against Iran under agreed timetable. Gradual termination of sanctions against Iran under an agreed timetable. Now, this is a walkway. This is a very, very big game changer. Iran has had sanctions for the last 49 years. Now, one of the claims or one of the parts of the points in the MOU that has been designed, Iran is saying that all the sanctions that have been imposed in our regime should be lifted. Iran is becoming a superpower. It is becoming a superpower. Because if this country, with all the restrictions of 49 years, has been in position to survive, what can happen if the restrictions are taken away? We shall talk about that maybe again. Then number 8, Iran reaffirms it will not develop a nuclear weapon. Both sides negotiate that the future of enrichment and existing enriched uranium stocks under international oversight. Iran reaffirms it will not develop nuclear weapons. This is also one of the biggest game changers. Now, in 2015, by the time of Barack Hussein Obama, there was a deal. They call it the ICOAP, the International Joint Cooperation, Iran International Joint Cooperation Program, where Iran accepted that they should not enrich their uranium to a level beyond 20%. That was a deal. And in order to ensure that this was granted, Barack Obama gave $1.7 billion to Iran. That was some of the money that was supposed to be coming in from an exchange that America had failed to supply to Iran in the last 30 years. So Obama repaid it. When Obama got it repaid, everyone in America, including Donald Trump, this was the basis that made him reject or nullify the deal that was negotiated amongst the powers. Trump so much condemned this deal because Obama gave out $1.7 billion. Actually, because America has sanctions with Iran, this money was not even wired. This money was transported in cash. That was during the time of Barack Obama in 2015. Trump blamed Obama for giving them the $1.7 billion. Guess what? The Trump that blamed Obama is giving Iran $300 billion. That's a little bit controversial. We shall come back to that. That is point number 8. Point number 9 says, Status quo during negotiations, Iran maintains its current nuclear posture while the US refrains from new sanctions and major force increases. That is point number 9. Point number 10 says the US Treasury waivers to facilitate Iran oil exports and related financial insurance and transport services during the negotiation period. That is point number 10. Point number 11 says release and accessibility of frozen assets, frozen Iran funds and assets according to agreed procedures. This is also one of the biggest changes. It says release and accessibility of frozen assets, Iran release and accessibility of frozen Iran funds and assets during agreed procedures. Now, Iran has had assets overseas, including in Qatar, including the UAE, including France, Britain, and America, and South Korea. All their assets have been frozen. They were frozen. They have been frozen for the last so many years. Now, Iran is saying, as part of this MOU, that all of our assets are supposed to be given, we are supposed to have access to them. Actually, all of Iran assets that have been frozen within the countries of the Persian Gulf, they amount to almost $24 billion US dollars. Out of the $24 billion, Iran has already facilitated the $3 billion. And that money has been received through Qatar. And before the end of this week, before the end of this month actually, Iran is going to receive 10 billion as well, out of the 24 billion, an amount that is equivalent to all the frozen assets. In other words, Iran is getting frozen assets. Their frozen assets, in terms of monetary value, they are going to receive them again. So when you get the 24 billion that's supposed to get in terms of frozen assets, and including the reconstruction fee of $300 billion, as the MOU says, Iran is going to get out of this conflict by receiving almost 324 billion US dollars. If everything is granted the way it is in terms of the MOU. Point number 12 says creation of a joint mechanism to monitor implementation and compliance. In other words, the mechanism that we're talking about, Iran is saying we can not only trust America and Israel, we also want to have some other countries get involved, such that this deal is so much sealed, not only between America and Iran, but also rather other countries are supposed to come in. Point number 13 says final agreement negotiations begin once key initial commitments are being implemented. That is also. Then point number 14 says the final agreement will be endorsed by a binding resolution of the United Nations Security Council. Now, this is a very big game changer. The final agreement will be endorsed by a binding resolution of the United Nations Security Council. In other words, they are saying, Iran is saying, it shouldn't be a negotiation between us and America. We should even have the United Nations Security Council come and get this granted. Now, one of the reasons as to why Obama's deal failed in 2015 rather, it is because it was between America and the few European powers. Now, Iran is saying we not only want it between us and America, we also want it between us and the United Nations Security Council. The United Nations Security Council has to come and endorse. That is point number 14 out of the 14 points that are supposed to be the shape, they're supposed to come up with the shape of the discussions, that are supposed to be leading the discussions that are going to have a permanent ceasefire between Iran and the US. As far as the operation that was declared by Donald Trump, Operation Epic Fury, is concerned. Yes, that is it. You're still watching New Day on TV1. I just wanted to highlight the 14 points so that we can move together in harmony without leaving anyone behind. You're still watching New Day on TV1. Let's go for a short commercial break. We are still coming back with more stories.
the difference. Every morning brings a new beginning and a new day. We bring you the news that matters when it matters. From international headlines to the stories shaping our communities at home.
Because where is my ocean? I'm entitled to that ocean.
With expert analysis, in-depth conversations, and deep dives into the issues behind the headlines, we don't just tell you the news, we break it down. Start your mornings informed, prepared, and ahead of the day. New day, clear news, real insight, a smarter start. Weekdays 6:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. only on TV1. Are you ready to build real skills for a better future? Tune in to Skilling Uganda, the show that empowers, educates, and transforms lives. From hands-on vocational skills to expert guidance and real success stories, Skilling Uganda connects you to opportunities that matter. Every Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Don't just stream it, skill it. Skilling Uganda, shaping Uganda's future, one skill at a time, only on TV1. See the difference. Get ready to power your weekend. This is where talent meets creativity, where ideas spark, and where the youth takes center stage. Introducing Youth Hub, the ultimate destination for inspiration, entertainment, and real conversations that matter. From trending topics and hot interviews to music, lifestyle, and everything shaping the next generation, we've got it all right here. So don't miss out. Join the movement, join the vibe, join the Youth Hub every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Only on TV1. See the difference. Don't miss on TV1.
Ebyenfuna, ebyenjigiriza, saako ebyobulamu, byonna byetoolera mu byobufuzi. Bakulembeze bangi be twalonda. Bebeyama babituukiriza. Ebyobufuzi si bibala byakucamuka. I'll give an example. Museveni takyamanyiriza by'Abannayuganda. That's a fact.
Prime Minister, order!
You are running Uganda at a very expensive pace.
2026 tusalawo ani agenda ani asigala mu program Inside Politics. N'olw'ensonga eyo tosubwa buli lwakusatu lwa wiiki ssaawa 3 ez'ekiro paka 5 ku TV1.
Amateeka z'empisa za Mukama Katonda. Webala malensonga naffe tuze kwebaza. Obulamu bwange bwakuweereza Yesu, wadde olutalo lukyali lwamanyi nnyo, and it could happen in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye.
When the beat drops and the stars come out, you know it's time for Spotlight. We bring the heat, no cold feet, live music, fire performances, and artists who don't come to play, they come to shut it down. From breaking entertainment news to what's making noise in the streets, if it's buzzing, trending, or causing a stir, Spotlight has the score. So grab your seat, turn it up, and don't blink, because the show stops for no one. Spotlight, where entertainment steals the show and leaves you wanting more. Every Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Only on TV1. See the difference. Ready to find your dream home? Welcome to Property Time on TV1, your ultimate guide to the best properties around town. Join us every week as we explore incredible properties, insider tips, and expert advice to help you make the right move. Whether you're buying, selling, or just dreaming, Property Time has got you covered. Don't miss out. Tune in to TV1 and let's make your property dreams come true. Property Time, only on TV1.
The global value of coffee businesses currently is US $460 billion.
Behind every cup of coffee lies a story of hard work, heritage, and opportunity. Our coffee celebrates the farmers, communities, and traditions that make coffee more than just a drink. It's a livelihood and a legacy. Join us as we explore the value of coffee farming, the benefits it brings to families and communities, and the journey from fertile soil to your morning cup. Discover the knowledge, passion, and dedication that keep the coffee industry thriving. Because when coffee grows, communities grow too. Every Saturday, 10:30 p.m. only on TV1. Our coffee, brewing stories, growing futures. A clean environment begins with us. Go Green is the program dedicated to inspiring communities to protect nature, promote proper sanitation, and build a healthier, greener future for everyone. Discover practical ideas on waste management, environmental conservation, tree planting, and community sanitation. Because when we respect nature, nature sustains us in return. Let's work together to keep our surroundings clean, safe, and green for generations to come. Every Sunday, 3 p.m. only on TV1. Go Green. Small actions today for a greener tomorrow.
Break, you're still watching New Day on TV1. See the difference. Yeah, in our next story, let's move to Kalangala. Now, there's a by-election that's supposed to be taking place in Kalangala. This is following the deceased MP, that was Ellen Nachimoli, who was a representative of Kalangala on the ticket of the National Unity Platform, who died previously, actually, I think last month, who passed on last month but one. Most especially, it was a very, very sudden death that so much left so many people with a lot of questions, because she was a young woman that was almost having a lot of energy in between, in trying to highlight the challenges that were happening to the people of Kalangala. So she passed away, and as the constitution says, there is supposed to be a by-election. And as we speak, a by-election is getting a little bit of fired up. Why? Because you have two representatives, that is Ida Nabaiga representing, or the flag bearer of the National Resistance Movement, and then Irene Nampala, who is also flag bearer of the National Unity Platform. Now, you don't have to forget that this area, Kalangala, has always been an NRM hotspot. It is a hotspot that the NRM has always been leading. It's just actually all the previous 4 or 3 members of parliament representing the region, or that region, Kalangala, all of them have been NRM. It is just Ellen Nachimoli who took over the leadership following the emergence of the National Unity Platform. So when she passed on, definitely they are supposed to have what you call a replacement. And the discussion or the competition is so much between Ida Namwanga, that is the flag bearer of the national, actually Ida Nabaiga, a representative of the National Resistance Movement, and then Irene Nampala, who is a flag bearer of the National Unity Platform. Now, there are so many people that have been seen on ground. The national platform is so much riding on the legacy and the energy that was left behind by Ellen Nachimoli, the deceased MP, and then also the NRM led by Aida Nabaiga, that's the flag bearer, who was there before. Actually, Aida Nabaiga was the NRM flag bearer, or was the woman member of Parliament of Kalangala District. That was from 2021 up to 20. Actually, it was from 2020 up to 2026. Yes, 2020 up to 2020. No, it is from 20. She was from 20. It was Aida Nabaiga actually was the previous MP who lost to Ellen Nachimoli, who lost to Nachimoli Ellen. Now she wants to reclaim a seat. And President Museveni is expected to go, given the fact that he has always been showing up in by-elections, most especially to endorse the candidature of the National Resistance Movement. Aida Nabaiga is very much interested in there. We've seen the members of the National Platform trying to go and canvass for support to ensure that they reclaim this spot. It was represented by one of the most prominent, formidable young MPs that was almost taking over the Parliament of Uganda by storm. And a little bit of Abario had a lot of issues, but Abario was something that brought up so many members of different political parties. Actually, the entire Parliament was so much grift, or so much, they were in a very terrible mode. Actually, you don't get a politician that can so much connect all members of Parliament or the entire Parliament on one side. They said that Nachimoli was a little bit of a different breed from the National Platform, who was on opposition, but she was also very supportive when it came to ensure that the government businesses or government programs in Kalangala are beneficial, or the people of Kalangala are beneficiaries from the programs that were endorsed by the government of Uganda. So Zainab Namwanga was the member of Parliament from the NRM ticket. That's from 2016 up to 2021. She was called Zainabu Namwanga. That was the leader or the woman member of Parliament in Kalangala, but she was also taking on the NRM ticket. And then before that was 2016 up to 2021. But before 2016, in 2011 up to 2016, we had a lady called Sarah Chiinji. Sarah Chiinji was also the NRM flag bearer. And then before Sarah Chiinji, we had Ellen Katusime. Ellen Katusime, she was the member of Parliament of Kalangala between 2006 and 2011. You can see that right here from 2006 up to almost 2021, all members of Parliament, all those 3 terms, were led by the National Resistance Movement. That is Annette Katusime rather, from 2006 up to 2011. And then from Anna Katusime, we had the Sarah Chiinji, still the NRM. That is 2011 up to 2016. She was also right there. And then from 2016 to 2021, we had Zainab Namwanga. So definitely from 2021 up to 2026, that's when we had Ellen Chiinji. So this makes it a little bit very difficult to so much determine who is going to take over. Because previously, if you've had almost 4 members of Parliament coming from the National Resistance Movement, and then the National Platform takes over right away from 2021 up to 2026, it makes it very clear that this has been a very serious NRM stronghold. So we believe that the NRM will be in a position to push using all their resources to ensure that they reclaim this seat. However, given the fact that the former Parliament or the former representative died mysteriously in things that were not so much clear, and there were a lot of politicking when it came to her death, this makes it a little bit very challenging to the incumbent or to someone that is taking over the NRM ticket. But you really don't understand. We just have to wish all these people the best, such that the area of Kalangala can get a new representative after the fallen hero, after the fallen comrade, that was Ellen Nachimoli, who passed on last month. So the by-election is supposed to be taking place. The 2 people that we are talking about have been so much endorsed by their political parties, and they've been cleared by the Electoral Commission to ensure that they compete and they get a replacement of Ellen Nachimoli. The by-election is in gear, and we expect the president of the chairperson of the NRM, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, to go and campaign for the NRM flag bearer, that is Aida Nabayiga. And then also the national platform has had people on the ground when in position to realize that Honorable Betty Namboze from Mokoni municipality has been one of the big wings from the national unity platform that is on the ground to ensure that their candidate is also getting a lot of energy to ensure that they reclaim the position that was left behind by the deceased Ellen Nachimoli. Someone who's holding up on the party ticket of the national platform is called Irene Nampala. Yes, that is it for the Kalangala election. We shall go to the next story. Our next story is about police. Now, almost 70 police stations have been established. Almost 70 police stations have been established in Uganda. That was as per the report that was given to us by Abbas Byakagaba, the the leader of the IGP of the police of Uganda. Now, the police came up with what you call a model. This model is called the sub-parish model. Sorry, not the sub-parish model. It is the sub-county level. Uganda has almost 10,700 sub-counties. Out of the 10,700 sub-parishes, sub-counties, in each and every sub-county, there is supposed to be a police station. Now, this is one of the areas that's supposed to ensure that Ugandans get a little bit of service and ensuring that law and order is maintained. So if someone says that they've been in position to establish almost 70 police stations in different regions in Uganda, that is something that highlights the intensity and the seriousness of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to ensure that Ugandans get a little bit of peace and stability, or their issues get a little bit of harmonized at that level. So these areas, Uganda has almost 10,700 parishes and almost 135 districts and almost 10 cities. So if you're saying that we are going to go by the sub-county model approach to ensure that each and every sub-county has a police unit or a police post, that is something that's going to ensure that the police gives out the best services that they need to give to different areas or to give to different areas or sub-counties in this country. This has been an approach that the police has embarked on for quite some time. So out of the 10,000 parishes, if you say that we are talking about the 70 police stations that have been established in different regions, you're going to ensure that almost 4.7% of all the sub-counties, at least they have police stations. Now, what the police does on ground, it is a matter of discussion. We can so much debate about it, but I think we can all agree that at least the presence of the police in different regions or in different sub-counties has been more of a very big plus, most especially when it comes to amicable, resolutions. When it comes to ensuring that there is peace and stability amongst the different areas where these political units are, where these police centers are being established. Yes, we are in position to understand that there are some areas that do not have police stations right away, because endorsing and deploying and facilitating police officers, it's a little bit of an expensive venture, very, very expensive. But at least there has been a very, very serious trial to ensure that policemen in different areas or at sub-county level are established to ensure that all sub-counties in this country at least manned by a police station. Like I've said, we almost have 10,700 sub-counties with almost 70,000 villages, with almost 565 town councils, we have almost 70,000 villages, right? 10,700 sub-counties, with almost 585 town councils, with almost 70,000 villages, with almost 135 districts. So manning Uganda, as far as police is concerned, is becoming a little bit of a serious issue that the police is talking on. Oh, not forgetting the 10 cities, because as we speak, We're no longer mentioning Kampala as the city. We are also mentioning other cities, including Jinja, including Masaka, including Mbale. All these are cities that, including Bara, all these are cities that have been established with almost, you know, a lot of parishes as well. So in order to ensure that at least there is law and order in various areas, the police is establishing various police units to ensure that at least there is law and order at different sub-county level. I believe this model is one of the best models that can help Ugandans to enjoy their peace. You know, Uganda is a little bit of a free community where people go and dance, people go and take beers almost in the morning. As we are coming back here, as we are reporting to work, people are enjoying beers around Kampala. So in order to ensure that Ugandans enjoy what they're supposed to enjoy, security is one of the key issues, and that is the role of the Ugandan police has been very fundamental in ensuring that peace and stability, in other words, law and order is maintained and protected within the boundaries of Uganda. So as we speak, almost 70 police stations have been established, and Abaske Byakagaba, the IGP of police, says that with more funding, they have to ensure that each and every sub-county at least has a functional or a functioning police unit or a police post to ensure that people within those specific areas maintain or have access to what we call law and order in those areas. Yes, that is it. Let's go for a short commercial break. You're still watching New Day on TV1. See the difference. We are still coming back with more stories. All right, let's continue. Let's continue with our next story. We have a little bit of a technical challenge right there. We shall get it noted off. Now, in other stories, let's talk about the increase of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There is a surge in Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, we've been talking about Uganda's cases. I think Uganda has only registered 7. If I don't have it right, I can be reminded. If Uganda, Uganda, we've not had so many cases, right? By the time the president gave us an address, we had almost 7 cases. And since then, we've not had a new case in Uganda. But in the neighboring country, the cases of Ebola are on the rise. That's why last week we did a story that America is supporting Uganda with almost $50 million US dollars to ensure that Uganda sets up a protection center within Uganda to ensure that we have a very serious response as far as Ebola is concerned. Now, as we speak, there are rising cases of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Uganda got a bit over $50 million US dollars from America to ensure that Ebola cases are being worked upon, and not forgetting the $500 million US dollars that Uganda also got from the African CDC, African Center for Disease Control. That is to support both Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to ensure that there is a very serious increase, a response as far as Ebola cases are concerned. Now, that was in the case of Uganda. All these centers are supposed to be put in Uganda, but you also don't have to forget that there is a quarantine center that was set up for Ebola in Kenya, but still this deal was also funded by America, by the American military. Yes, the Ebola cases are rising in the Democratic Republic of Congo. By the time we closed the last week but one, we had almost over 1,000 cases. But as we speak, they are saying that we almost have 1,200 cases. You know, the cases are rising. And the Congo is a country that is getting seriously affected in this country. Because of the Ebola that we're talking about. People are dying, and a little bit of cases that have been reported are on the rise, most especially in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So as we speak, almost 896 cases have been confirmed in Eastern Kivu, in Northern Kivu rather, and Southern Kivu. And almost 232 death cases have been reported. 232 cases are being reported. Okay, out of the 892 people that have been affected by Ebola, that is according to the report by the World Health Organization, out of the 896 rather, 232 have been declared dead. Now that means there is something that we really need to get worried about, most especially for our brothers right there in Congo. Now there are so many people that are trying to ensure that Congo is helped, to ensure that the diseases that are affecting them don't affect them that much. But the fact that they've had over 232 cases and these are dead people, that means the disease or the outbreak is getting on the rampage. Like it's seriously hitting on so many people in this country, because you can't say that Uganda only recorded one case of a dead person. But in the Congo, as we speak, there are almost 232. All these people are dead. You don't have to forget that Congo is a country that has had so many cases. The first case that was recorded of Ebola in Congo was recorded in 1970. As we speak, Congo has had almost 7 cases or 7 outbreaks. Congo is the chairperson of Ebola in Africa, not only Africa, in the world. The chairperson of Ebola on this continent is Democratic Republic of Congo. They've had almost 7 cases, and this is very worrying, to the extent that almost over the 1,000 cases that have affected the people, almost 232 people have died. And it's very specific in Kivu, in the northern part of Kivu and the southern part of Kivu. Now that's a little bit very worrying. You have to forget that Congo is not okay. The country is not okay. They've never seen peace in so many decades. The M23 people are fighting in there. The FDR forces are fighting in there. The Mai Mai fighters are in there. The ADF fighters are in there. Come on, it's a little bit of Sam Katogo in this very country. They are not only being affected by the diseases, but they are also being affected by the rebel activities. You can mention almost 10 rebel groupings that are affecting this country. Amidst the rebel activities, that's also when you get an insurgence of a disease. It's becoming a problem for our brothers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But of course, there is a response. Now, Ebola in the Congo has a lot of mixtures. Like it's mixed up. Last week, we did a story here that the doctors funded by the World Health Organization were somehow beaten. In the Congo, almost 3 hospitals were burnt. Not hospitals, but centers, treatment centers, emergency treatment centers that are set to ensure that treatment is being passed on to the Congolese were burnt. Were burnt because for the Congolese themselves, they were saying that there is no Ebola, we don't have Ebola. To the extent that a team of doctors was attacked. A team of doctors was attacked when they were claiming that they were going to go for a burial ceremony. They were going to bury someone that had died from Ebola or that died of Ebola. When the doctors got beaten, the casket that they claimed was carrying a dead person, it was empty. There was nothing in there. Not even a dead animal. There was nothing like a dead person. Right? So this is something that has sent a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myth and misconceptions against this disease in this country. The Congolese are saying that we don't have Ebola. Cases are being reported. Maybe they are not reported to the level that they claim they are. By the time the president came up and gave a speech, he said that there has been a lot of escalation in terms of numbers. The way with the Western media and the World Health Organization is claiming that the number of cases that Uganda had and the Congo had of Ebola was a little bit very hiked to ensure that these guys get what we call attention. You don't have to forget that one of the organizations that had challenges is the World Health Organization. It has had challenges. So they are also trying to ensure that they come up with ways on how they can get refunded. One of the biggest funders of the World Health Organization has been America. But last year December and early this year, Donald Trump, the president of America, walked out of the 66 agencies of the United Nations Organization, including the World Health Organization. Since last year, the World Health Organization has not had funding, yet the biggest funding has been coming from the United States of America. Could this be the reason as to why the surge or the rampage of this disease is claiming so many lives, that the World Health Organization doesn't have any support, it doesn't have the mechanism, it doesn't have the hand to ensure that they respond effectively? Could it be the challenges that the Congolese are saying that we don't see Ebola here? Could it be a breakdown of the systems due to the funding or due to the less funding that the World Health Organization is supposed to get? So as we speak, there is a surge of cases of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And of course, a surge in the cases, it puts a country like Uganda at stake. We have a very, very big borderline with the Congo, right away from West Nile, almost up to Kabale. All that area, we share a border with the Congo. That makes it very, very fragile. That makes it very, very delicate. Not forgetting that Congo is one of the biggest trading partners that we have as a country. So meaning that we have to take a lot of precaution as a country to ensure that our country is protected and also our brothers in the Congo are protected. Uganda is supposed to be sending some medical personnel. The country is supposed to be sending some medical personnel to ensure that the Congolese are helped. Instead of waiting for them to come here, the president said, no, we should also be in a position to send in some medical personnel, Ugandan medical personnel, to ensure that our people or our brothers in the Congo are somehow helped, to ensure that there is a little bit of, some kind of treatment that can be offered to them before probably Ebola surges and it comes to Uganda as well. Yes, that is it. Let's go for a short commercial break. You're still watching New Day on TV1. See the difference.
The Khoisan people of Southern Africa are an ancient ethnic group with a long and interesting history. The Khoisan history tells us that there is no race in human history. This is because of the belief that they are the earliest humans and that every human emanated from them. Fascinating, right? Watch this video to the very end. Stay tuned. The Khoisan people of Southern Africa have been recognized as one of the earliest formed distinct human genetic groups for several years now, but new research appears to peg them as the earliest split from the main human family tree so far discovered. The Khoisan is a collective term to refer to the various hunter-gatherer indigenous tribes of Southern Africa. The two evolutionarily related but culturally distinct groups that makes up the Khoisans are the Khoikhoi and San people, and they have occupied Southern Africa for up to 140,000 years. The ancient origins, anatomical and genetic distinctiveness of Southern African, San and Khoikhoi people are matters of confusion and debate. They are variously described as the world's first or oldest people, Africa's first or oldest people, or the first people of South Africa. Their first people status is due to the fact that they commonly retain genetic elements of the most ancient Homo sapiens. This conclusion is
The In Africa segment. Today we've decided to so much remind people that the cradle of life as far as human existence is concerned is Africa. We were highlighting the oldest people that have ever lived on this planet, or we talk about the earliest Homo sapiens that have ever lived on this planet. Now, from the word Homo, that's where we get the word human from, and then sapien,
from specific types of DNA.
A modern brain.
While Homo sapiens
That's why
evolved roughly
the first Homo genus, when we're talking about what we call the first Homo genus, or the first levels of human growth and development, sorry, not human growth and development, the first levels of human evolution, we don't use the word sapien anywhere. We first go to what you call the Homo habilis. Homo habilis, that was a time when man was in position to use what you call the hands. So the Homo habilis, that's what we refer to as the level where human beings were losing what we call the arms. Habilis means, and most of the people that were called the Homo habilis were living in the Nyamatora province, that is in Kenya. So from the Homo habilis, we go to what we call the Homo augusta. And then from the Homo augusta, we go to what we call the Homo neanderthals. Now, the Neanderthals are a little bit of close to human beings, but most of them were in Europe. And there's so much claim that most of the descendants of the Neanderthals are those people referred to as the Vikings. If you've watched movies about the Vikings, they are so much not close to human beings. But today we decided to highlight on some of the earliest human beings that have ever lived in Africa. And it's stated that the San people so much lived in South Africa. By then in South Africa, that place was referred to as Zania. In most cases, we want to talk about South Africa after the coming of the Dutch in 1600. But before the coming of the Dutch, before the coming of so many other foreigners, that land was land of local indigenous people, and these people were referred to as the San. And there is sufficient evidence that probably the San also lived within the East African region, because one of the oldest historical places that we have in East Africa, it is in Uganda, what we call the Nyero rock paintings. The Nyero, if you go to Nyero rock paintings, there is what you call the map of the entire world, where our ancestors had also mapped what we call the galaxies, to the extent that it has almost all the planets, including Pluto, Saturn, Mercury. Actually, if you go to Nyero rock paintings, you can even see Saturn with its ring, because that's one of the biggest planets. It was so much engraved in there with its ring. That's almost 12,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago. So the San are the first people, the earliest inhabitants of the land of South Africa, or the earliest inhabitants of the so-called Homo sapien, or the modern men on the African continent, not only on the African continent, but also globally. Now, as we speak, of course, with so many migrations, the San intermarried with the Khoikhoi, that gave birth to what you call the Khoisan. Even when you go right now to South Africa, they have a little bit of a click sound. When they are speaking. There is a certain accent that they use. They so much bring in their tongue when they are pronouncing whatever that they are pronouncing out. And one of the biggest attractions that made so many Europeans come around, it's because their women had big bums. If you remember that history in Senior 4, each one of us could not even forget the point. If you're defining the organization of the San people, we could not forget the click sound and the point that their women had big bums. But of course, the big bums can also be explained that since their women were more of domestic people, in other words, they used to spend most of their time at home, meaning that they were seated or they were supposed to be carrying babies. This is what accounted for the emergency or the development of that part, what we would call big bums, but also the expansion of what we call the pelvis girdle. Now, the pelvic girdles, that is the system that is responsible to enable human beings produce, most especially women. It so much helps in the production process. So that's why they probably had a little bit of a wider pelvic girdle. I mean, a wider one, of course, that would mount out as big bums. When the weights came and they were like, okay, so they so much got interested and never wanted to go back to their countries. But we just wanted to highlight and let you know that in our Today in Africa segment, we are focusing on the San people as the earliest inhabitants of this continent. And we are not only referring to them as earliest inhabitants, but we are referring to them as the earliest human beings that lived at the level called the Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo means a human with a sharp, developed brain. Sapien means a developed brain. We had the radio, sapien refers, that's Latin. We are referring to the structure of the human brain. Now, the structure of the human brain has also been evolving. Human beings have not only evolved to the extent that they become Homo erectus. Homo erectus meaning that you can stand erected on the spinal cord, and then from becoming Homo erectus, you become Homo habilis. Homo habilis meaning that you can stand using your hands. All this can be understood when it comes to what we call understanding of what we call the geological time scale. Now, the geological time scale is the geographical scale we use to measure time. And of course, it is divided into 4 sections. We have what we call an eon, an era, a period, and an epoch. Right? An era, an eon, a period, and an epoch. That's how we measure time in what we call the geological time scale. But as we speak, so many people are saying that the Sun people lived as early as 100,000 years. That is almost the entire beginning of what we call the Cenozoic era. Now, as we speak, like I've said, when you measure in what we call the geological time scale, we go by the era, we go by the eon, we go by the epoch, and then we go by the period. As we speak, we are in what we call the Cenozoic era. The Cenozoic era started 65 million years ago. 65 million years ago, that is when we ended what we call the dinosaur period. Of course, when that a little bit of geography there, when we ended what we call that is when the dinosaurs became extinct. That is almost 65 or 66 million years ago. So that period that started is what we call the Cenozoic era, and that's where we are right now. Some of the characteristics of the Cenozoic era is having humans just like you and me, is having humans with a developed brain, or what we would call a Homo sapien, is when most of us can feed, is having so many mammals that feed on green plants. Those are some of the earlier characteristics of what you refer to as the period that you can refer to as the Cenozoic era in terms of the geological time scale. So that is it. You wanted to highlight that, just in case you're forgetting about that. Don't forget that Africa has always been the cradle of life. Africa has always been the source of everything. Africa has always been a solution to all our the problems. Not forgetting that all those people, including a person that migrated, that gave birth to all other people, what would we call the mitochondria Eve? Because the mitochondria Eve is the person that lived or that moved away from Ethiopia almost 200,000 years ago, right? That's the first person. We call her, we refer to her as the mitochondrian Eve, because all human beings on this planet, whether you're Chinese, Russian, American, 99.9% of our DNA is the same. 99.9 almost of our DNA is the same, meaning that we came from one source. But what would we call a genetic difference, even if it's just 0.01%, it can bring out a lot of differences. If we say that 99.9% of DNA is the same, and you place me around, and on this side you bring an Indian, you might think that I'm telling you lies. Because an Indian is so different from me, a Russian is so different from me, an American is so different from an African, right? But what we call a genetic difference, even if it's 0.0001%, that means a lot. It can bring up a lot of difference when it comes to biological expressions. So we just wanted to highlight that the Sun people are the first inhabitants or the first Homo sapiens to exist or to live on this planet. Most of them lived into the land of Azania. As we speak, of course, with the intermarriages, they intermarried with the Khoikhoi, and then they got into the Khoisan. Now, as we speak, most of the descendants of the Khoikhoi, you can get them in South Africa. Some of them are in Angola, others in Namibia. You can get some of them in Botswana. You can get some of them in Botswana. Of course, from the Sun, you can go to the Khoikhoi and you will go to the Bantu. As we speak, almost the entire southern part of Africa, including Botswana, in Gaborone, South Africa, Cape of Good Hope, and then you come to Angola, Rwanda, and then you come to Namibia, Gaborone, and then you go to Zimbabwe, Harare, then you go to Madagascar, Antananarivo. Most of those areas are dominated by the Bantu speakers. But before the Bantu, there were the Khoikhoi and before the Khoikhoi, they were the San people. That's the earliest Homo sapiens that lived within that very region. So just in case you're forgetting, don't forget that the earliest human beings, or the Homo sapien means a human being with a developed brain, with a sharp developed brain. Because how our brain is developed, it's so much developed from the brain of monkeys, it's so much developed from the brain of other mammals. That's why a human being is referred to as Homo sapien. Why? The levels of the human brain and the levels of the brain of other mammals is the same, because the brain that we are referring to is made up of 3 levels. We have what's called the neocortex, or the upper brain, the chemical brain, which is in the middle, or the emotional brain, and then the downer part, which we call the reptilian brain. Now, the difference between the brain of a dog and the brain of a human being is at what we call the level of the neocortex. A human being has a bigger neocortex than all mammals. That is what makes us the Homo sapien, meaning a human with a sharp developed brain, which is very, very important in having a very vivid sense of imagination and a fantastic sense of memory. Those are the 2 faculties that that differentiate, that bring up a very big dichotomy between human beings and other mammals. That's why we are referred to as the Homo sapiens. All right, let's hit for a short commercial break, and we are coming back with the sports segment with the Samdei Kalyango. You're still watching New Day on TV1. See the difference. Welcome back from the sports segment with Samdei Kalyango. Hope you got to know what happened, most especially with a group where Iran, Belgium, Switzerland, and Egypt are struggling, most especially when each one of them has almost 2 points. That's a big one, but I support Iran. I support Iran just because of what they are going through, to see that probably they get a win. They get a win, irrespectiveness of the challenges that America has posed to them, because first of all, they were a little bit disappointed. Almost the entire technical team was denied access to the land of America. Why? Because they claim that all members of the technical team of Iran are members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. So America denied them access. 2, America denied them residence. All the players, the entire team of Iran is not supposed to play. They are not supposed to stay in America. Yet almost all their matches are in America. Like yesterday, their match was in Los Angeles, and they have to move from Mexico. So they have to travel from Mexico to come and play in America, Los Angeles, And in most cases, FIFA allows countries to have a little bit of 24 hours, to come a little bit earlier, 24 hours, to prepare for the game. But for Iran, it's not the case. Iran is supposed to come at the time of playing. Then after playing, they are supposed to get out of America. So that's a little bit, makes it very, very, very unfair. The principle of fair play is not allowed. It has been denied to Iran. So that's why I so much feel that the 2 games they played already, they put up some good resistance, irrespective nature of challenges that they've gone through, not forgetting almost some of the prominent players were denied access to the land of America. That's why probably I expected them to have a little bit of a victory over Belgium, but definitely they didn't get it, because the Belgians were also very much interested in having a win right there. So we shall be in position to have Samdei Kalyango over again at 3-4. He always come back. He will always, come back to give a little bit of a detailed analysis of what is happening in the world of World Cup. Back to our stories. Now let's take a flight and enter into the land of Zimbabwe. Now, Zimbabwe or Zimbabwe, it is Zimbabwe, or the houses of stones. That's the real African name, or the real African meaning of the name Zimbabwe. It refers to the houses of stones, or something that was built by stones, and this is one of the most ancient civilizations. Those that have been living, those that have had a chance to move to Zimbabwe, at least you can get to understand a lot of historical sites that are found in that area. Now, we are not talking about the historical sites in that area. We are talking about the political term. As we speak in Zimbabwe, there is a very serious confrontation about the political parties. Now, the current president of Zimbabwe is called Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now, Mnangagwa is saying that we need to change the term. Now, the political term of Zimbabwe has been going for 5 years. Mnangagwa kati agamba, he wants it to go for 7 years. He's saying, okay, no. Because of the challenges that we are having in this country, let us not go for 5 years. Let us go for 7 years. And guess what? There is a limited opposition in there. Because if you happen to look at a little bit of the challenges that are going to come out, most especially from the opposition, they can't really make it if you get to understand exactly how the structure of Zimbabwe politics works. Because as we speak, just like Kenya and just like South Africa and just like some of African countries, Zimbabwe also has a two-system set up. They don't have only one parliament, just like Uganda, where you have almost 529 members of parliament. No. In Zimbabwe, it is a two-system, it is a two-approach setup, right? Now, the political term of Emmerson Mnangagwa was supposed to go up to 2028. Now, the proposal is they want the political term to go for 2030. That is from 5 years to 7 years. And guess what? The lower house has already endorsed it. The lower house has already endorsed it. Like I was telling you earlier, that the system in Zimbabwe is made up of two systems. You have what called the Senate. The Senate is made up of, that's the gentleman, Emmerson Mnangagwa. That's the gentleman you're looking at right there with the Pan-African flags right there. But I was talking about the two system establishment in the country. The point is here. They have what you call the lower house and they have what you call the Senate. Now, the lower house is made up of almost 280 members of parliament. 280 members of parliament, right? Out of the 280 members of parliament, the ZANU-PF, that is the Zanzibar African National Union Patriotic Front, that is what we call the ZANU-PF, which was set up by a gentleman called Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo in the early 70s. This party, out of the 280 members of the lower house, the ZANU-PF has almost 194 members. Now, the Citizens Coalition for Change, that is led one of the most outstanding political parties, actually the second biggest, the first biggest opposition party, that is the Citizens Coalition for Change, the CCC. It has almost 64 members of parliament in the lower house. And that is led by a gentleman called William Chimosa. Or William Chamosa. Now, the third political party, that is the MDC, Movement for Democratic Change. Now, that is the one that is led by Morgan Tsvangirai. Morgan Tsvangirai was a little bit popular, most especially between 2018, 2017, 2019, right there. Those are the three biggest political parties. You have what you call the ZANU-PF, the Zanzibar African National Union Patriotic Front, that is ZANU-PF, which was established by, of course, a combination of Joshua Nkomo and a little bit of a support from Robert Mugabe that has the leadership, right? And then, like I've said, in the lower house, they almost have 194 members of parliament. And then the second biggest, that is the Citizens Coalition for Change, the CCC, or the Triple C. Now, that is led by Chimosa. Now, that has almost 60 members of parliament. It's the first biggest opposition party. And then the third biggest opposition party, the second biggest rather, because the party leadership is called the ZANU-PF. The first opposition, that is called the CCC, Citizens Coalition for Change. And then you have what's called the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, that is led by Morgan Tsvangirai. Now, they also have a few members of parliament. That is in the lower house. So the lower house has already approved that the term should be extended from 5 years to 7 years. That is in Zimbabwe. Now, the take is going to go to the upper house. Now, the upper house is what you call the Senate. that is, of course, made up of senators. Let's look at the Senate and how it is comprised of. Like we've said, the lower house is so much dominated by the members of the ZANU-PF. That's the same, including the Senate. The Senate is also led almost by the members of the ZANU-PF. Because we said the upper parliament, the lower parliament, it is dominated by the ZANU-PF with almost 194 members out of the 280. Now, the upper Senate or the Senate is made up of 80 members or 80 senators. Out of the 80 senators, 33 are senators from the ZANU-PF. 18 are traditional leaders. In Zimbabwe, traditional leaders are also part of society management. It's not like Uganda, where they are supposed to be political heads, cultural heads. In Uganda, according to the Constitution of 1995, cultural leaders are not supposed to participate in partisan politics. In Zimbabwe, they are members of what we call the Senate. So out of the 80 members of the Senate, 33 members are members of the ZANU-PF. 18 members are traditional leaders. 4 are members representing the persons with disability. The rest, now you can just get to understand that is almost 70, that is almost 65. So the remaining seats are the seats that are shared between the Movement for Democratic Change, which is led by Morgan Tsvangirai, and then the Citizens Coalition for Change, that is led by Chimosa. Meaning that if the lower house has already approved, it's going to be a little bit easier for the Senate also to get it approved. Why? The numbers game. It's a numbers game. And as we speak, the ZANU-PF or the Zanzibar African National Union Patriotic Front, that is led by Emmerson Mnangagwa, so much takes a lead. The political party wants to change the political term. Emmerson Mnangagwa was supposed to be giving up leadership in 2028. Now, when this extension is made, it means Mnangagwa is going to lead Zimbabwe up to 2030 or 2030. Now, everyone is in his support, a little bit apart from a few voices that are coming in. The Vice President Chiwenga is also in support. So we don't expect a lot. But you have to understand that Zimbabwe is one of the first African countries that have gotten a lot of issues. We've been talking about a story between Sonko and Ifaye in Senegal. But there is also a lot of differences. Most especially when it comes to finances in Zimbabwe. The country is very broke. They don't have money. Why? Because of the so much loans that we are so much accessing from the World Bank and the IMF, and they failed to pay back. This also came up with the arrangement that was made by Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Robert Gabriel Mugabe was the first leader. He first served as a prime minister. Zimbabwe was one of the last African countries to get political independence. Zimbabwe was the third last. The second last was Namibia, because Zimbabwe got independence in 1980. Namibia got independence in 1990. South Africa got independence in 1994. You understand? So the point is that we are talking about 3 countries within the entire region or within the same region that politically became independent very late. Because by the time Zimbabwe became independent, Uganda had already been independent. That's why Uganda was one of the countries that so much supported the independence of Zimbabwe, to the extent that it was Uganda and Tanzania that were the headquarters when it came to the operations of the ZANU-PF. Most of the members of the ZANU-PF, including Robert Gabriel Mugabe, were living in Uganda, staying in Uganda, not very far away from where I am because of security purposes. I will not mention the place, but he was also staying in Uganda, right here, and by the way, in Kampala, and also in Tanzania. So they got independence in 1980, but since then, it has been only the ZANU-PF. It has been the ZANU-PF. But before the ZANU-PF, there was also the ZANU. ZANU, Zanzibar African National Union, that was started by Joshua Nkomo. But of course, they went into a merger. They merged because they were all soldiers of the same battle. They merged. Joshua Nkomo came together with Robert Gabriel Mugabe, and they fought for the independence of their country, which they achieved, or they received, or they acquired rather, in 1980. And since then, it has been the ZANU-PF that has been taking over leadership of course, from Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the second president as we speak about, or we talk about right now, it is Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is a continuation or a continuity of the ZANU PF, because he's also one of the formidable members that were very instrumental in the liberation of the land of Zimbabwe. So the point is very simple. Emmerson Mnangagwa is saying that the 5-year term is not that enough. Mnangagwa ali mugikwatako nga Uganda bwe yagikwatako Article 102. Mnangagwa is saying no, the 5-year term is not enough. That is the same arrangement that Paul Biya did. Paul Biya also dealt with it in Cameroon. A political term in Cameroon goes for 7 years. Paul Biya was voted again at 92. As we speak, he has acted for so long. Paul Biya or Cameroon never had a vice presidency. There was no position in the constitution. There was no position of the vice president. But this very year, a law was enacted that protects or defines the role or the position of the vice president. And as we speak, Cameroon has a vice president. And the vice president of Cameroon is the son to Paul Biya. Now, it's a little bit, you know, this is Africa. And we are talking about what's happening on the African continent. But I just wanted to highlight that. But going back to Zimbabwe, just like I've just told you, a political term in Cameroon goes for 7 years. So by the time Paul Biya gives up for leadership, because he was born at 92, by the time he gets done with his term, he's going to be 99 years of age. Wow. Wow. Okay, going back to Mnangagwa is expected to get this extended. Why? Because there is limited opposition. Just like I've told you, the lower house, which is made up of almost 280 members of parliament, out of the 280 members of parliament, 194 are members of this political party. And they've already endorsed, they've already approved. The people that would put up a little bit of opposition, they would be members of the Chimosa, of the Citizen Coalition for Change. That is led by Chimosa, but of course by numbers, they don't have the numbers. And also the one for the political party for Morgan Tsvangirai doesn't have the numbers as well. That is for the Movement for Democratic Change, or what's called the MDC. So the MDC, Movement for Democratic Change, for Morgan Tsvangirai, and the Citizens Coalition for Change, that's why Chimosa, they don't have the numbers. Even when they come together, they can't have the numbers, right? So that gives a little bit of a hand. That's why the lower house has already approved. Like I've told you, they are going to have it extended to the Senate. And like I've told you as well, the Senate has almost 80 members. Out of the 80 members, Mnangagwa or the ZANU PF is already having 33 members. Out of the 33 members, out of the 80 members. And 18 members of the Senate are traditional rulers who are as well vetted by the ZANU PF. And then the 2 members, they are also members of what we would call the persons with disability. They represent persons with disability. Meaning that almost 60 members out of the 80 members, they are in bed with Emmerson Mnangagwa. Yeah, this is how Balwanyi behave. So the Balwanyi don't behave like that. Uganda, Zimbabwe, Egypt, and Tanzania, they have a little bit of a socialistic approach. I'll come back and explain more about that. But moving forward, still, you don't have to forget that Zimbabwe has had what we call currency depreciation. The currency, the monetary value, or the currency, or the value of the Zimbabwe's currency has depreciated beyond measure. That country has so much been surviving on loans and support, to the extent that even the capital, Harare, was almost running out of water, electricity, because they never had the money. Actually, you could compare what was happening in Zimbabwe, Harare, with what's happening in Havana, Cuba. Because when Cuba was denied access to the oil, that is after the arrest of Nicolas Maduro by America, Cuba and Havana, everyone was almost starving without essential commodities and without access to most of the social amenities that could have been provided with the presence of oil. Electricity was down. There was load shedding, like for long hours and hours without having any light anywhere in Havana. That is something that Zimbabwe also went through. Now, by the time Gabriel Mugabe left leadership, he had conquered land. He had taken away land from the foreigners. They never had land. All their land was taken. That was in a law that was passed in early 2000. He came up and said that how can whites own land in the country that's not theirs? You don't forget that Zimbabwe was one of the colonies that were seriously taken over by the whites. That's why in 1965, they declared what you call the UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence. This declaration was made by a white gentleman. He was called Cecil Rhodes. Actually, that's why Zimbabwe was called Southern Rhodesia. It was called Southern Rhodesia because the gentleman that took it over was called Cecil Rhodes around that time. But of course, a descendant of Cecil Rhodes, a gentleman called Ian Smith, took it over and declared it independent away. This was a Briton, or someone from England. He took it over and declared what we call the UDI. I guess it was around 1965. It was not until when a joint operation that was made by a lot of pressure that was exerted to him and his forces from Britain itself and a combination of so many African fighters through giving their support to ZANU-PF that this man was made to cough it out. So, because of the mineral resources, Zimbabwe is one of the countries that has the highest volumes of gold. I think apart from Uganda, Congo, Zimbabwe ranks third or number 4 as one of the countries that has a lot of gold on the African continent. So these guys never wanted to get rid of it. They never wanted to give it away. So it has a lot of gold. They have a lot of diamonds. They have a lot of lithium. Actually, one of the biggest countries that is doing a lot of business in there when it comes to lithium, because lithium batteries are needed, most especially in a lot of technological advancements that are made, most especially during this era where we are operating using what you call AI. You need lithium. Lithium batteries are very, very important. So one of the countries that has the highest volumes or depots of lithium is Zimbabwe. That's why Zimbabwe stands out. Now, when Emmerson Mnangagwa took over following the death of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, so many people expected that Mnangagwa was going to give off the land again back to the white settlers. But he said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Instead, he said that I am going to come up with a policy that's going to compensate white settlers. So many people expected that he was going to give out the land again that had been used by the Britons. But of course, the white farmers or the white settlers. When Robert Mugabe took it over from them, Mnangagwa came and so many people expected that he was going to give it back to them. But he said, no, we are not giving you the land, but instead we can embark on what you call a compensation scheme. Instead of giving you the land that you don't own in the first place, let us just compensate you. In other words, Mnangagwa has tried not to be a little bit very radical, not to get a little bit extreme, like Robert Gabriel Mugabe. He's trying to balance a little bit, but of course, just know all these are socialist ideologies. He was a Marxist. All these leaders that we're talking about, Balwanyi, they have a mindset of Balwanyi. So he doesn't so much think like a common politician. These are the guys that have really fought. They have not only fought for independence, but they fought for the liberation of this continent. So they so much don't look at democracy, and they don't so much want to please. They are pro-Russia. Actually, the name of Marxism is so much related to the Marxist ideologies and all the policies that are shaping business or political identity or political socialization as far as Zimbabwe is concerned. Of course, we can't go away from Zimbabwe without talking about Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Actually, is the highest educated president on the African continent that has ever taken over the state house. The most educated one. I think Robert Mugabe, if I'm not mistaken, he had almost 6 degrees. He had a bachelor's of arts in arts. He had a bachelor's of arts in arts. He had a bachelor's of education. He had a bachelor of laws. He had a bachelor of science in economics and so many others. Actually, he had almost 6 degrees. That is Robert Gabriel Mugabe. That's why he was very, very, very sophisticated. I don't know, don't you ask me about other leaders, but at least Robert Gabriel Mugabe was that land fellow. You know, he knew what he was doing with a bachelor's of arts in arts, a bachelor's of education, a bachelor's of science in economics, and a bachelor of laws. And of course, some other courses that were a little bit helping him to establish himself as one of the most prominent African leaders and a Pan-African scholar that, of course, we, lost right away. But he's the father, he's the founding father of that country. And the people like Emmerson Mnangagwa are walking into his legacy and are trying to ensure that the legacy that was left behind by Comrade Robert Mugabe is being pushed. But Mnangagwa has not so much been radical. He has not gone into the extreme side of extremism, rather. He has tried to balance the relationship between them. That's why we're talking about a compensation scheme where he's embarking on a policy that's going to ensure that probably the white settlers who lost their land during the times of Robert Mugabe, they have a little bit of some compensation for the land that they lost right there. Wow. It has been a very wonderful morning. Thank you so much for keeping up with me since keeping up with us, because I've been not bit alone. I've been with Samderi Kalyango, our producer Regan Mugabe, and then our co-producer in the control room, Mr. Jaka Musisi. All those people have been working together to ensure that this program airs out well. Don't forget, this program starts at 6. Starting this week, we've decided to pick it up from 6 a.m. up to 9. So see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. You're still watching TV1. Get ready for Skilling Uganda and so many other programs. Yes, see you tomorrow. Keep watching TV1. See the difference.